The Grand Hall of the Galactic Assembly was a marvel of engineering, a vast chamber of gleaming obsidian and shimmering starlight, where the most powerful species in the galaxy convened to dictate the future. Tonight, however, the chamber was filled with something else, anticipation. Whispers rippled through the assembly as the Dominion made their entrance. Towering over most of the other species, the warriors were an imposing sight. Their bodies were a seamless blend of flesh and machine, cybernetic limbs pulsing with contained energy, neural interfaces glowing like miniature stars embedded into their skulls. They moved with calculated precision, their artificial enhancements granting them a grace that defied their sheer size. Their leaden, High Marshal, stepped forward, his mechanical fingers flexing with a subtle hum of power. His voice, laced with electronic resonance, echoed through the chamber as he spoke. "The age of flesh is over," he declared, his golden cybernetic eyes scanning the room. "We, have transcended the limits of biology. We have perfected our forms, shed the weakness of aorganic imperfection, and embraced the true path of evolution. Those who refuse to enhance themselves are relics of the past, unfit to survive in the age to come." A murmur of agreement rippled through parts of the assembly. Many species had already embraced cybernetic augmentation, integrating machines into their bodies to varying degrees. However, had taken it further than any other, transforming themselves into beings that were more machine than aorganic. Some saw them as the pinnacle of progress. Others, as a chilling warning of what was to come. Then, the doors at the far end of the chamber opened. The human delegation entered, moving with an air of quiet confidence. And like they bore no visible enhancements. No neural implants, no mechanical limbs, no gleaming cybernetic augmentations. To the untrained eye, they appeared fragile in comparison, mere flesh and blood standing against the might of warriors. And yet, there was something in the way they walked, something in the set of their shoulders and the calm in their eyes, that exuded a different kind of power. The contrast was striking. The humans, the only major species that had outright rejected cybernetic augmentation, now stood before the assembly in silent defiance of everything they had just proclaimed. Smirk twisted into something between amusement and disdain. "And here we have the humans," he said, gesturing toward them with a sweeping motion of his mechanical arm. "The last species in the galaxy still clinging to their fragile and modified forms. Tell me, humans, do you truly believe you can compete with those who have embraced perfection? Have you come here to admit your inferiority?" A chuckle spread through some of the gathered species, but the humans remained unfazed. Their leader, Commandant Elias Grant, stepped forward. His uniform was simple, unadorned, free of any enhancements or status markers. He met gaze with an expression of measured amusement. "We didn't come here to admit anything," Grant said smoothly. "We came to remind you that strength isn't found in meta and circuits. You assume we're weaker because we don't rely on cybernetics. We're here to prove you wrong." The murmurs in the chamber grew louder. The smirk remained, but there was something else in his expression now, a flicker of something he couldn't quite place. Was it doubt? He folded his arms across his massive chest. "Bold words," he mused. "But words are meaningless without action. If you truly believe your unmodified forms are equal to ours, then I propose a test. A demonstration. Let the galaxy see the folly of your beliefs firsthand." Grant's lips curled slightly, that carried an edge of challenge. "A test? That's exactly what we had in mind." The tension in the chamber thickened. Eyes darted between the humans, some filled with curiosity, others with trepidation. The idea of unmodified humans standing against the cybernetic elite of the galaxy seemed ludicrous. And yet, there was no hesitation in Grant's stance, no uncertainty in his words. Chuckled again, but this time there was an undertone of calculation in his voice. "Very well, human. We shall convene in the combat arena. There, your people will learn what true power is." Grant inclined his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "We'll see." As the human delegation turned to leave, a whisper spread through the gathered species like wildfire. This was not just a challenge. This was a battle of ideologies. A test that would determine whether the future belonged to those who had abandoned their aorganic roots or those who still believed in the strength of the unmodified form. As the massive chamber doors closed behind the departing humans, exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Something about the way those humans carried themselves unsettled him. It wasn't arrogance, nor was it ignorance. It was certainty, as if they knew something he didn't. His mechanical fingers tightened into a fist. No matter. Soon, the entire galaxy would see the truth. And the humans would finally learn the price of their stubborn refusal to evolve. The combat arena was a coliseum of towering steel walls and reinforced barriers, designed to withstand the might of the most powerful cybernetic warriors in the galaxy. It was a place where enhanced champions clashed in displays of raw power and technological superiority. The stands were filled with representatives from countless species, all gathered to witness what many believed would be display of the Dominion's supremacy. At the heart of the arena, two opposing groups stood. On one side, the combatants, 6 warriors clad in gleaming beta armor, their bodies augmented with cybernetics. Their reinforced limbs hummed with artificial strength, and their neural interfaces glowed like molten metal, directly linked to their enhanced reflexes. Their leader, a towering soldier named, stood at the front, his arms crossed over his chest, a smirk playing at his lips. On the other side, the humans. 6 of them, standing without armor, without visible enhancements, their uniforms simple and unadorned. There were no cybernetic limbs, no neural links, no mechanical augmentations. To most watching, it was laughable. The warriors were practically demigods compared to the seemingly frail and unmodified humans. Yet, the humans stood with a quiet confidence, as if the absurdity of the match did not concern them in the slightest. In the stands, murmurs rippled through the audience, many openly wondering why the humans had agreed to such a lopsided contest. The answer would come soon enough. High Marshal, observing from the VIP balcony, leaned forward as the announcer's voice boomed across the arena. "The challenge is simple, a test of strength, speed, and combat ability. No weapons. No outside interference. The last team standing is victorious." Let out a mechanical chuckle, rolling his enhanced shoulders. "Try not to break too quickly, humans. It would be a shame if this ended too fast." He flexed his cybernetic arms, the servos whining as they powered up. The humans exchanged glances, unreadable expressions passing between them. One of them, a woman with short blonde hair and piercing blue eyes, gave a small shrug. "All right," she muttered, cracking her knuckles. "Let's get this over with." A loud siren blared, signaling the start of the match. And his cybernetic warriors surged forward, their enhanced speed turning them into blurs of motion. To the audience, it seemed inevitable that the humans would be overwhelmed in seconds. But then, something happened that no one expected. The humans moved faster than anyone anticipated. Not enhanced, not assisted by cybernetics, but purely through muscle memory, instinct, and sheer skill. The first warrior, aiming to land a devastating blow, swung a cybernetic fist at one of the humans. But the human wasn't there. He had already sidestepped, fluidly weaving away from the attack before delivering a strike of his own. A single punch to the side of the warrior's head sent him stumbling, his systems momentarily glitching from the impact. The crowd gasped. That shouldn't have been possible. Barely had time to register the anomaly before another of his warriors was flipped over a human's shoulder, the cybernetic soldier crashing into the ground with a force that cracked the arena floor. Another human ducked beneath a strike, using nothing but perfect timing and reflexes to avoid the crashing blow, then retaliated with a kick that sent his opponent sprawling. The warriors tried to adapt, increasing their speed, recalibrating their movements, but the humans remained a step ahead, their fighting style unpredictable, fluid, almost impossible to counter. They were reading their opponents, exploiting gaps in their movement, using leverage and precision instead of brute strength. It was an art of combat that no amount of cybernetics could replicate. Frustration turned to disbelief as he watched his team fall, one by one. These humans weren't enhanced, yet they were faster, more efficient, and completely unreadable in their movements. They weren't just reacting, they were anticipating. The final moment came when, himself lunged at the last human standing, determined to at least bring one of them down. His cybernetic fist, capable of shattering reinforced steel, swung with deadly force. But before it could connect, the human sidestepped at the last possible moment, grabbed his arm, and used his own momentum to throw him onto his back. The impact sent a shockwave through the arena, and the rest of the warriors lay defeated. Silence. The entire Colosseum had gone deathly still. The announcer, seemingly at a loss for words, finally managed to stammer, "The winners are the humans." A stunned murmur spread through the crowd, disbelief turning into awe. Even among the cybernetically enhanced species, there was a dawning realization that what they had just witnessed defied everything they had believed about physical superiority. High Marshal, golden cybernetic eyes narrowed as he gripped the railing before him. This was not how it was supposed to go. He had expected a slaughter, a lesson in the inevitable triumph of cybernetic evolution. Instead, the lesson had been his to learn. In the center of the arena, the human leader, Commandant Grant, simply exhaled and rolled his shoulders. He looked down at, who was still trying to process what had just happened. Grant offered him a hand. "Cybernetics aren't evolution," he said evenly. "They're a crutch. Strength isn't just about what you instill into yourself. It's about what you train, what you earn, and what you understand. And you rely on the machine to think for you." Stared at him, then at his own shaking mechanical hand, fingers twitching as if for the first time he questioned whether they were truly his own. As the humans turned to leave, the silence in the arena stretched. And then a slow clap. One alien, then another, until the entire crowd was roaring in approval. They had just witnessed something extraordinary. Something terrifying. Something that shattered the notion that cybernetics made a species superior. High Marshal remained seated, his expression unreadable. But deep inside, something unsettled him in a way he had never felt before. The humans had just proven something he had refused to believe. The room was eerily quiet, save for the faint hum of artificial lighting and the occasional flicker of holographic displays lining the walls. High Marshal sat at the head of the council chamber, his metallic fingers drumming against the table in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Across from him stood, his confidence now reduced to a silence. He had not spoken since the beta, and the weight of his defeat still hung over him like a storm cloud. Around the chamber, various Dominion officials sat in stony silence, their cybernetic enhancements gleaming under the cold glow of the room's overhead lights. Each of them had watched the match, had witnessed the unthinkable. The humans had won, without a single modification to their bodies. It was a fact none of them had yet come to terms with. Golden eyes, augmented to process data faster than any aorganic mind could comprehend, flickered as he analyzed the footage again. Frame by frame, he watched as the humans dismantled his warriors with a combination of agility, foresight, and raw skill that should not have been possible. His processors had flagged anomalies in their movements, impossibly fast reactions, an almost supernatural ability to predict attacks, and a level of adaptability that even the most advanced Dominion combat programs could not replicate. It was not cybernetic enhancement, not artificial intelligence guiding them, but something far more terrifying: pure ability. "This is unacceptable," a voice growled from the far end of the table. General, one of the Dominion's most decorated commandants, leaned forward, his mechanical jaw clenching tightly. "We have spent centuries perfecting the art of augmentation. Cybernetics have elevated us beyond the limitations of flesh. And now, we are expected to believe that mere humans, unmodified, fragile, aorganic creatures are superior to us. His words carried a dangerous edge, but no one refuted him. Not yet. Finally spoke, his voice low and bitter. They are not fragile, he admitted, his gaze distant, haunted by the memory of his own defeat. They are something else entirely. His fists tightened, the servos in his knuckles whining under the pressure. They read every move before it happened. They struck with precision, not power. They didn't need enhancements. They fought as if their bodies had already been honed to perfection. Studied him carefully before turning his attention to the rest of the room. The truth is before us, he said, his voice measured and cold. Cybernetics have made us reliant. We have grown complacent, believing our technology makes us invincible. The humans have exposed the weakness in that thinking. He gestured toward the holographic display, where a paused frame of the fight showed a human effortlessly sidestepping a warrior's attack. They do not simply react. They anticipate. They calculate without the need for enhancements. The room fell into tense silence as the implications of his words settled. Knew that acknowledging this truth would be dangerous. The Dominions' entire philosophy was built upon the idea that technology had freed them from biological limitations. To admit that their enhancements were not an advantage, but a crutch, was heresy to their way of life. We must adapt, continued, or we will fall behind. A ripple of unease spread through the council. General sneered. You would have us abandon our advancements? Return to the weakness of flesh. No, said simply. But we must stop relying on our enhancements to think for us. We have seen what happens when we do. We will study the humans. We will learn their methods, their strategies, their training. If they can reach this level without cybernetics, then imagine what we could achieve if we mastered the same techniques. His golden eyes scanned the room, daring anyone to challenge him. We have spent too long believing we were superior. The humans have proven otherwise, and that cannot stand. For a long moment, no one spoke, then exhaled sharply and nodded. If we are to fight them again, we must understand them first. Scowl deepened, but he said nothing. He was too proud to admit it, but even he could not deny what he had seen. The Dominions' greatest warriors had been bested. The humans were not weak. They were something far worse. They were efficient and predictable. And now, they had the Dominions' full attention. Leaned back, satisfied. The lesson had been learned. But another thought lingered in the back of his mind, when that unsettled him more than he cared to admit. If humans could achieve this level of combat ability without any enhancements, what would they become if they ever chose to embrace them? The training chamber was silent except for the rhythmic breathing of the warriors within. The Dominions' finest stood in a wide, circular arena, their cybernetic limbs gleaming under the artificial lighting. The air smelled of ozone and heated matter, the scent of countless battles fought in this very space. Across from them stood the humans, unmodified, and yet utterly unfazed. High Marshal watched from an elevated platform, his golden eyes scanning the scene before him with cold calculation. This was the final test, the culmination of their study, their attempts to understand the anomaly that was humanity. The Dominion had adapted, trained to fight as the humans did, without reliance on their cybernetics. Now, they would see if it had made any difference. Stepped forward first, rolling his shoulders, the servos in his enhanced arms disengaged. He had demanded this test personally. He needed to prove, to himself and to his people, that he could overcome the humiliation of his prior defeat. Across from him, the human warrior stood motionless, hands loose at his sides, his expression unreadable. The Dominion had analyzed their techniques, broken them down into data and algorithms. This time, they would be ready. A sharp chime echoed through the chamber, signaling the start of the match. Moved first, closing the distance in a single fluid motion, his footwork refined through months of relentless training. He struck fast, his aorganic muscles carrying the momentum, no longer relying on the speed enhancements of his cybernetics. The human sidestepped effortlessly, his movements precise, his balance unwavering. Pressed harden, unleashing a flurry of blows, but the human was like smoke, slipping between his attacks without wasting a single motion. Frustration boiled in his veins, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had studied their methods, learned from his mistakes. Then, for the first time, the human attacked. A sharp strike to ribs sent him stumbling back, pain blooming across his side. His opponent had barely exerted any force, yet the impact was devastatingly efficient. Grit his teeth and adjusted his stance. He could feel the eyes of the Dominion War Council upon him, watching, waiting. If he failed again, it would mean that even after all their efforts, the Dominion was still behind. He lunged again, adjusting his strategy, but it was no use. The human read every move before he made it, reacting with an instinct that no cybernetic enhancement could replicate. Barely saw the next strike coming before he was on the ground, breath knocked from his lungs. The chamber was silent. From the observation platform, clenched his metallic fingers against the railing. The rest of the warriors in the chamber were motionless, their expressions unreadable. Forced himself up, chest heaving. The human had already stepped back, waiting, calm and unreadable as ever. The fight was over. The result was undeniable. Even with all their attempts to replicate human adaptability, they were still one step behind. Turned sharply, exiting the chamber without a word. The others followed in silence, their failure weighing heavily upon them. As they entered the council chamber, the tension was palpable. Finally, General broke the silence, his mechanical jaw tightening. "We learned their methods," he growled. "We trained like them. We fought like them. And still, we lost." His frustration was shared by many in the room. Said slowly, steepling his fingers in thought. "The humans have something we do not," he admitted. "Something beyond tactics and training. They have spent their entire existence adapting to survive. They are forged in hardship, in war, in unpredictability. We have relied on technology to close the gap, but they never had to. That is their strength." The council remained silent, absorbing his words. Finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "We thought our cybernetics elevated us," he said bitterly. "But we have only made ourselves dependent. They fight with nothing but flesh, and yet they are stronger." He exhaled sharply, looking too. "What do we do now?" Golden eyes flickered, deep in thought. "We must change," he said simply. "We must evolve beyond mere augmentation. If humans can reach this level without enhancements, then we must find what makes them strong, not just mimic their methods, but understand the source of their power." His gaze swept across the council. "We will continue to study them, not as enemies to surpass, but as a force to learn from." A heavy silence followed his words. Finally, General scoffed. "And what if they evolve again before we catch up?" Lips curled into something that might have been the ghost of a smile. "Then we will have to hope they never see us as true threats. Because if they ever decide to augment themselves, we will not stand a chance."